I got into it a little bit when Facebook first bought the Oculus, which was now like 3 years ago. And they were touting it as they rolled it out at F8, and everybody in the audience was wearing one. And then they seemed to be saying it was ready then, and obviously it wasn't. But it seems like it's having a moment.
So are we live now? Are we just having a one-on-one chat, or are we? Is this?
Well, I think we're just people are ambling about. We'll start at about 6:45. So we'll leave a few more minutes. A couple other people
Whenever
might show up.
you guys are ready, you can go for it. I've already started the stream, so if you guys feel like talking, go for it, or if you guys want to mingle, go for it.
Okay, cool. Let's see. There's a couple people in the crowd. I see Mike.
Yo.
So, Mike Everon, raise your hand. He runs Crypto Mondays Los Angeles. He's been running. This last week was the first week you used Jitsi instead of Zoom. How did Jitsi work?
Jitsi worked fine. Yeah. What? Anybody else hearing that music?
I'm just not hearing the music, but we can barely hear you.
Huh. I just unmuted.
Yeah, I was hearing. Hey, by the way, Lou, you want to take a selfie with the crowd behind us? I don't know if you.
Oh, sure. Yep. Okay, hold on a second.
Oh, got your pants, but I didn't get your head. You have to come a bit closer to me, I think.
There you go. How's that?
Oh, almost. One more time.
It's not easy.
Yeah, I kind of got you. That'll do.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on, man. Let me try. Hold on a second. You ready? 1, 2. Let's see. Not quite sure what the hell that. Try one more.
Yeah. So it's always a selfie by default, I think, for some reason.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. See, I feel like I'm above everybody. In my selfie, I'm way above everybody.
You are.
Does it feel like
you are elevated a little bit? Yeah.
And Liz, are you more elevated? What?
I don't know. You're elevated. I couldn't tell you. You're in the ground.
It's fine. You're in gold.
What is that?
Oh, there you go. Now you're on the stage again.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now you're in the stage.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, got a few more folks showing up. Hey, let's see. Hey, JP, where are you from? JP?
I might have to unmute him. Let me see. Jacob. Is JP Jacob? Or
no,
JP John? Okay. JP, you're unmuted. Go. You can talk ahead.
All right, that's me, right? I'm JP. I'm not sure.
Yes,
I'm from Germany, from Dresden.
Okay. Welcome. How did you find Crypto Mondays?
Well, I went to ETHVR, and then there was a link somewhere, and people talked about Crypto Mondays, and then there was also this list from.
Okay. Now, so we this. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm from Montreal, Canada.
From Montreal?
Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, I got I'm in the Bitcoin VR Telegram group, and that's how I heard about you guys.
Cool. So you've been going to those meetups? It's interactive, and you kind of sit down. Here we're gonna yak for about 20 minutes, open it up to questions for 10 minutes, and then the rest of it is just mingling around with everybody.
Sounds good.
So I think, Annalise, I think we'll start the official things. Guys, welcome everybody here to Crypto Mondays VR. This is our fourth meeting in VR. And I feel like everyone that the technical gets a bit better. And excited tonight to have joining us I think you're our first international guest, Jamie Burke, who's the founder and CEO of Outlier Ventures. Jamie, welcome.
Clap, 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 clap.
Everybody, thanks for having me.
And so I was just, Jamie was just saying, this is your first VR event. What do you think so far?
I like it. It's a little bit odd, but I'm looking forward to doing the networking afterwards. It's late here. It's like almost midnight. So
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for joining us at this late hour. Hopefully you've got a drink in front of you.
I do. Yeah, very strong. Belgian beer. So let's see. If I start slurring my words, that's why.
Okay, cool. I'm sure you've said it before, but you want to kind of quickly go over kind of your Bitcoin origin story?
So I founded Outlier Ventures over 6.5 years ago. Probably came across Bitcoin 6 months or so before that. Went to the first Bitcoin conference in the UK. And
who put that on?
I can't remember. All I can remember was Brock Pierce was there, and it was like a very thin panel. There weren't that many people there. It was hosted in Canary Wharf, so the financial district, and it kind of blew my mind, really. I guess my background prior to that had been working in digital innovation, change management. So for better or for worse, I kind of came into the space with fairly enterprise-oriented mindset. I imagine none of the companies that I worked with would ever engage with it, but intellectually saw the possibilities of its underlying technologies, how they could be applied, and also the strength of Bitcoin, in and of itself. So at that time, I was an angel investor just on my own. I just exited a startup, and at that point,
what was the time frame now?
So we're 2020. So it would have been 2013, I guess, mid 2013. And at that point, got intellectually interested, and then increasingly occupied a lot of my mental space, and then I started to move a lot of my capital over. But at that point, there wasn't really much to invest in beyond Bitcoin. So it took me a while before I made the leap to create Outlier Ventures. And I found a co-founder who's still CTO, a guy called Aaron Van Ammers, a Dutch guy. And pretty much just put him on a retainer for a year and said, look, let's just get some applied learning. Let's start playing with the technology. And then, of course, Ethereum came along. So, always been not directly, but indirectly playing with the technology, seeing what's possible, and then trying to build out a thesis from there.
And so when did you make your first investment in crypto outside of Bitcoin, like as a VC?
Professionally as a VC, so we were the first kind of institutional investor into IOTA.
There you go.
So that was a pretty good investment. It performed well. And it was also kind of a deal that we had to do, in that at that point, we were the first blockchain investor in Europe as a fund, and our thesis was around convergence. So it was looking at how AI, IoT combine and converge with DLT, and so they were the first real instance of that. They were engaging with a number of enterprise, largely German enterprise, who were in our ecosystem, and so they were our first, crypto asset investment and our first convergence investment outside of equity startups and of course Bitcoin and Ethereum.
So that must have been quite a ride. Where is IOTA headquartered?
It's in Berlin, so they made the conscious decision to set up the foundation in Berlin. Actually, I think it took about 18 months in total, but rather than offshore in Singapore or something like that, they always were open to working with industry, particularly the German industry, so Bosch, VW, and players like that, and so they knew to be able to kind of engage with that type of customer that they would have to. They couldn't be some exotic, offshore entity, that they'd have to be onshore. And I believe that they were the first token finance foundation in Europe. So they went through quite a bit of pain to get that set up, but I think it worked out for them in the end. It paid a dividend.
Yeah, I mean, I remember at one point, for those who don't know, IOTA is an Internet of Things. That's a DAG, right? It's a DAG, a direct acyclic graph, which is, theoretically capable of, massively higher throughput than a normal blockchain, which is sequential. And at one point, I think it was over $10 billion valuation.
Yeah, I mean, it was, they'd always been on the peripheral of the ecosystem at that time. You'd see them at meetups, and I didn't really know that much about them. I didn't know at the time that there was a Slack group, I remember, where there was OTC happening in the Slack group. And at that point, it had a network value of 100 million. And I just kind of knew them as a couple of guys that you'd see occasionally, predominantly Dom, at meetups in Berlin. And it was only when we got talking and you realized that the level of momentum that they had building up at that point in this fairly, very decentralized, informal market. So that piqued my interest, and then it went, significantly up after our announcement and a number of enterprise engagements that they had.
Interesting. Okay, so that's good. What was the second investment?
Well, so we've always structured ourselves as an incubator. Actually, now we're more of an accelerator. So with the incubator, we were working with projects over several years. So the immediate project that we started working with after that was Fetch.ai, which at that point was a startup based out of Cambridge, founded by some of the early team from DeepMind, which is the kind of deep learning competency that got acquired by Google. And at that point, they were trying to apply decentralized systems to enable, I think it was drones. So, how could you basically have a drone, throw it up into the sky, and it would start performing economic activity, and that network could be secure and be used in industrial use cases or kind of logistics and stuff. So the problem that they were trying to solve, they realized very quickly that there wasn't actually a blockchain that could enable that level of machine learning on chain. So we were the first investor, and I think it was over almost 2 years, they set about building everything bottom up. So actually, it's a hybrid blockchain DAG. It allows for significant parallelization and throughput, but importantly, they built several layers, including an economic layer, and that enables AEAs, autonomous economic agents, to carry out economic activity on ledger, bottom up, and so kind of markets can form organically and in a fairly autonomous way. So it's quite futuristic in vision, but they managed to get the mainnet out. They did a modest ICO on Binance. They managed to get the mainnet out in December, and now they're kind of iterating on a number of enterprise use cases. So all in all, I think that was a 3-year journey. So that was our second investment, and it took 3 years before it came to fruition. And we worked with them on everything from, the crypto economics, the listing, the distribution strategy, enterprise engagement, some of the technical decisions, and we're still intimately involved in that now. So as far as I'm aware, aside from the foundation, we're the largest token holder.
That's super interesting. So now, you've been doing this now in the European ecosystem for 3 months. How do you think about the ecosystem? How would you help the folks here kind of put the European ecosystem into context, kind of some of the different cities and how you compare it to what's going on in the US and Asia?
Yeah, so if you look at our portfolio now, I think we're 25 investments. And I think half of those we've incubated or accelerated, and the other half are live networks that we've engaged in kind of growth stage as an advisor and investor. And of those, 50% are actually in North America and 50% in Europe. So whilst we're based in Europe, it's definitely where we're strongest. We've won a few awards as the kind of preeminent investor in Europe in the blockchain space, but our portfolio is very much transatlantic, and so we've had the good and the bad experience of helping US-based projects try to bring a token to market, and if they have brought a token to market, continuously navigate the complexities that go with that. So, I think there are big differences between both ecosystems. I think, so historically, Europe has obviously been dominated by the Ethereum community. That is beginning to fracture a little bit. People are going off and setting up new initiatives. And alongside that, I'd say there's been much more of a focus on use cases beyond financial services and DeFi, predominantly because of this industrial heartland primarily coming out of Germany. So I think as that evolved, what we've found is within our convergence thesis, there are a lot more kind of blockchain plus type projects in Europe. So blockchain plus IoT like IOTA, blockchain plus AI like Fetch, similar to Ocean, looking at a new data economy, which ultimately is leading to how this kind of new data substrate can be leveraged for machine learning and AI. I think you compare that to certainly the US. The US is still much more focused on either consumer use cases around gaming or DeFi. So I think that they're broadly the differences. We've seen a lot of projects leaving North America to set up shop in Europe. Europe is actually a very...
So, Annalise, I'm sorry. Hey, is it Danielle? Is it possible, Annalise? Oh, I think Annalise stepped out. Danielle?
What's up?
Give it.
I'm here.
Oh, no, I'm just saying we seem to have somebody up on stage.
Oh, I was like,
Oh, there we go. Okay, she's gone. Okay.
With the intruder and stuff, security.
Yes.
So, interviewing founders, as the title would suggest, but also VCs and even regulators, and looking at the interplay between regulation and innovation. And yesterday I had Peteris Tilgavis, who, if you don't know, you should really check out. He's Latvian. However, he runs fintech and blockchain for the European Commission. He also runs the European Digital Single Market Initiative. In the way that he describes Europe's approach to crypto is it's very pro-innovation. So they've been incredibly permissive compared to, say, the US. They've not generally moved forward with a lot of legislation. They've allowed each member state, each country to kind of forge their own path. And that's confused a lot of people because they haven't given explicit permission. But, you know, from their perspective, they believed that not doing anything and observing was being pro-innovation. And so actually, Europe is very progressive in understanding the role of crypto, way beyond just financial services and kind of financial inclusion. They've already begun to tie blockchain and tokenization directly to a lot of impact measures. So from energy, climate change, and several other measures. So recently they've just created, I think it's going to be a second Your Fund, specifically for blockchain plus AI. So for them, you know, they've already made the connection beyond financial services and understanding that actually, if you want decentralized AI, then you need to enable a decentralized infrastructure that can incentivize this to be kind of built bottom up. So they've kind of really connected a lot of dots that I've not seen in the US and to be honest with everyone else.
Interesting. So, you know, one of the things we do at Crypto Mondays is we allow questions from the audience because, yeah, we're very interactive. So if anybody has questions from the audience, Annalise, anybody from the audience have a question, raise your hand. If you've got a hand to raise. Going once. If anybody has a question, oh, there you go. Jason, Annalise, let's see. Jason, can we unmute Jason?
So question is, all right, okay, thanks. So my question is, okay, what's a DAC? Can you, earlier you were mentioning, okay, that there's a hybrid blockchain. Okay, can you explain a little bit what's a DAC, okay, and how, you know, autonomous agents, okay, economic layer, you were mentioning that. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What is the use case?
Yeah. So basically,
and just by the way, Jason is he's part of Bitcoin Malaysia, so he's in Kuala Lumpur.
Okay, cool.
Good morning.
Yeah. So basically, the starting point for Fetch.ai was they are AI people, they're machine learning people, and you know, like most people that main often have when they were building Fetch.ai in its original incarnation, they wanted to understand how devices, in the first case it was drones, could communicate together in a decentralized manner in order that no one central party would control the network and in theory, you could have one or several devices. You could throw them up into the air, and they could carry out economic work within certain parameters. Complete jobs, tasks, whether that's taking footage of fields for agriculture or anything else. Very quickly, they instinctively they came to us to say, well, how could blockchain solve for this? As we all know, blockchain and smart contracts generally, and certainly at that point, really struggled to have much high throughput. And so for them, they needed for machine learning to be able to happen on chain, and there was no blockchain that could handle that. So they began to explore DAG technology, inspired by what IOTA were doing, but they realized that they needed some of the characteristics of a blockchain as well, the kind of finality, to be able to combine the two, so they get the benefit of parallelization of DAG, and they get the benefits of finality of blockchain. And exactly how those technologies work together is a bit above my pay grade, but that's kind of the basic principle. And so what that enabled them to do was to have a ledger that could handle high throughput work. Actually, they created something called useful proof of work. So the ledger actually optimizes work by building trust between them as they want to exchange value. So it's effectively a smart ledger. That then allows the ledger to optimize, and then equally allows for truly smart contracts to happen on top for them. So they built their own smart contract programming language called Etch, which effectively allows you to build machine learning agents on top of the ledger. So it's incredibly sophisticated, also incredibly complex. So now what they're working on is interoperability. I believe it's backwards compatible, so their Etch is backwards compatible to Solidity, and they're now looking at interoperability generally with Ethereum. So, but they approached it. What was interesting for us was they approached it from a AI perspective, and then they kind of built bottom up.
So living I'm here in my apartment in New York, and my guess you can't hear it, but I'm hearing so many sirens in the background. It's a little deafening actually. And with what's going on in the UK, obviously Boris Johnson. Do you think is the European Union, you think, gonna survive?
Whoa, that is, again, that's above my pay grade, right? I mean, I can have opinions on it, but I'm very pro-European. And I believe that we can thrive. That said, I think that there are some really big challenges ahead of us. Beyond Corona, actually, hopefully Corona is a temporary thing. It could have elements of a new normal in it, but climate change is much bigger, and I would argue that some of the challenges around the web are much bigger. So, what I think Europe has right is kind of twinned approach. So on the one hand, it's very permissive of innovation. So Europe has already been ahead of the US on everything from peer-to-peer lending, equity crowdfunding, and then crypto. And at the same time, the European Union is not afraid to take on the large web platforms that exist today, either from a GDPR, a data perspective, right to be forgotten, or anti-competition, monopoly, antitrust, I guess you would say here in the US. So if you look at the way that the web is today, I think we can all agree it doesn't really work. I would argue that Europe offers a third way, a really important third way for the web. So if you look at what's come out of the West Coast and what I think the US is only really just waking up to is this idea of surveillance capitalism. If you look at what's emerged in the East, it's kind of digital statism. So to be clear, in the West, out of Silicon Valley, you have shareholder supremacy. Everything is subordinated to the shareholder value. And this is why you have Facebook doing what it does and Uber doing what it does. What's emerging out in the East is digital statism. So everything's subordinated to the state. And I believe Europe is the only jurisdiction or region that is pursuing a web and an internet that is oriented towards the user and to their sovereignty, the kind of citizen user. And I think that this is probably one of the most important things happening in the internet right now. And as a consequence to how much the internet is, central to almost all social and economic activity now, I think a really important moment. So only an institution as powerful as the EU could do that. The UK could not balance it. European Union, I believe, is probably one of the only institutions prepared to take on the kind of web platforms at the moment, and at the same time be brave enough to foster bottom-up innovation through things like crypto, through things like DAOs. You can see a lot of stuff that's been happening in Estonia around e-citizenship.
Yeah, that's a super interesting take. And are there cities that you think are leading the charge?
Yeah, it's kind of strange. So the UK's normally would, but I think we've been very preoccupied with Brexit. Almost all the state apparatus is pointed towards negotiating both with the European Union and then within Parliament. So in that kind of action, the UK would normally lead. Just steps up, and as I said, the European Commission has not really regulated at the European level. They've kind of they've given guidance and they've let member states take their own course. So, for example, France is being incredibly proactive generally within startup and innovation. I think they've got one of the larger pots of money for state-backed financing of startups, and it's pretty much a helicopter. I mean, they're not that selective of who they give money to, as long as you are being innovative and you have the potential to be high growth. But Macron comes to power, his Minister of Finance, one of the first things he did was put forward some very progressive laws around crypto, which was a kind of opt-in sandbox. So when the whole ICO thing was going off, he said, look, we're not going to regulate, we're not going to prohibit people to do ICOs unless it's outright fraud, but we'll create this sandbox. And if you want to come into the sandbox and effectively get government approval and the rubber stamp, then there's a higher bar, there's a standard that you must meet. And I'm not sure how much that was taken up, but they've certainly been very progressive. If you look at Germany, they've also been quietly progressive in thinking about crypto assets, and then different member states have taken different approaches to how you tax crypto assets. I think in Portugal, for example, there is 0% tax on capital gains from crypto or any kind of transaction.
we do about 20 minutes of, us talking. If we have one more question from the audience, we can take that. Going once. If anybody has one, raise your hand. Going twice.
We actually have a question from the chat room and YouTube. What would you say is the most promising / unique technology in the space in terms of user utilization / monetization?
So we're an investor in Brave browser, an equity investor, as well as tokens. And I think, like Web 1, the kind of catalyst for that was the browser. And I think what's really interesting about what Brave are doing is they promise to be kind of a gateway for the mainstream user into crypto. Because it's just a better browser, right? It's a better privacy-preserving browser. People use it not because they're thinking about tokens or crypto, but the byproduct is they get an in-browser wallet. They start earning tokens without necessarily understanding what they are initially. And I think could very well be the thing that introduces things like SSI, self-sovereign identity, and DIDs, decentralized identifiers, via browser and via web experience. So, if you look at the kind of closest thing we have to a killer app beyond, Bitcoin, and something that promises to cross over into mainstream, it's probably Brave.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've seen some interesting user numbers from Brave. It'd be great, like, if they expanded on that, and talked about, engagement, how often are they using it? How much money are people making? Is that a difference, or does that even matter? My guess at this point, the majority of the advantage is just the privacy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, privacy is the reason why people use Brave. I think earning BAT is a byproduct. And then I think, what they're doing really well is now onboarding ways to spend that. And I think they've done a number of partnerships with media partners, both around kind of the ad blocking functionality and increasingly how you can tip and pay for content. So, I think the success of Brave is really going to come from what they enable people to build on top, rather than necessarily what Brave as an entity do themselves.
That's super interesting. Are you familiar with? Are they enabling that now? And if so, is there anything?
Yeah. So I've actually been trying to schedule an interview for this podcast I'm launching with Brendan. It's proven quite difficult, so I can get a bit more of an update on exactly what the roadmap is and the path. As you say, there's been some really interesting numbers around user growth, and it's not quite exponential, but it's certainly getting a nice curve to it. And they have been rolling out a number of partnerships, but the exact direction that they intend to head to is difficult to say.
Okay, well, it's nice to be talking about the curve of something that's not the virus. So thank you for that. And now we get to come out and hang out with the folks who came. So let's give Jamie a big hand. Right? Yep.
Thanks, everybody
out there. Yeah. So thanks, and please take a picture of us over here.
Sure. Let me back up over here.
Where do you go?
I'm right here.
There you go. Oh, no.
Let me.
Okay.
All right. Let me know when you're ready for the picture.
Ready?
Once. Twice.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Cool.
One more.
Wait, one more.
All right.
Okay.
There you go.
Thanks for that, Jamie.
Great. I'm not I can hang around for because it's quite late. I've got an early start with my daughter, but I'll come and hang around.
Okay, well, people understand. It's late for Jamie. It's like, after midnight. Thanks, Annalise.
Yeah.
No
thank you
problem.
for
I thought that went well.
Yeah, I'm gonna mute you guys. Start mingling.
How's it going?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, my hand doesn't work.
I'm in LA right now.
Cool. We're in LA.
Yeah. Oh, hey, what's going on? So you're in London,
How's
huh?
it going?
Hey, Doc.
First time
Really?
There's also random.
Okay, cool. We're in the.
One second, I can't hear you.
Yeah, let's go back.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to get back. Yeah, I would live in Santa Monica, Venice. I think living near the beach is kind of where it's at. I still spend a lot of time in LA. Yeah. Have you been to Crypto Mondays LA?
I've been to random.
This is my first time at Crypto Mondays.
How's it going, Jamie?
So Crypto Mondays,
Hey, how you doing?
when people are get together, they meet at 12:12
Oh, cool.
Like, lets you network.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Okay.
Funny that, like,
So you said you were
after consensus.
okay, and this was live stream. Did you say on YouTube?
Yeah, this is also being live streamed right now through that channel, that my profile right there.
So yeah, as Lucas said, we,
Okay, awesome.
Alright, have a good one.
yeah, we.
So
we
that's
meet
through
at
that's
12.
through the official channel, right?
Actually, we're having a
Is there
video
a-
YouTube channel, and then
later
Crypto
on,
Mondays
later
has
on
been
this
sharing
evening.
it
If you
around.
want to join us on Jitsi,
Okay, got you.
Telegram group, the
So
whole nine.
what other
Yeah.
events do you do?
On Mondays is Crypto
Where are you
Mondays.
guys,
Tuesdays I do a
where are you
VR
guys
podcast.
Santa Monica.
Muted on Wednesday. They usually just play video games and VR.
Yes, absolutely.
Thursdays we
you know,
have
12 on the
Annalise
promenade,
and
yeah.
my other colleague.
Yeah,
Tim.
yeah,
They get together on YouTube and
Yeah, so
they have a
that's
show
what we meet
called
every
Fun
Monday,
Crypto,
where
where they just
when,
drink
you
alcohol
know,
while talking
when
about
we actually
crypto.
have,
During
the ability
crypto
to.
winter. So we do
First
that
of
on
all, we're in
Thursdays.
Santa
and I'll
Monica,
put that
do you
in
live?
VR right here so you can watch it. And on
Oh, I'm, like,
Fridays
closer
is
to, like,
game
Marcus.
night. So we'll play some video games. I
Oh,
want
okay,
it to
cool.
be
Yeah.
more open video
I'm at
games. So
Arena.
you
Oh, yeah.
guys play video games as well.
Oh, nice.
Whereas
Very
on
good.
Wednesdays you just watch me play video
I
games.
haven't. Right. Okay.
I haven't been to any crypto
Awesome.
meetups for.
Well, thanks for filming it. I guess I'll check
Last
that out a little bit
convention
later.
was
Absolutely.
did
If
I
you're in
miss
the,
it?
I'll send
It
you
was
the
down at
link in the
yeah,
Telegram.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a few. That was
He's
right
muted.
before the
I'm about to just.
2017 all-time high. I was probably.
Right, guys, I think I'm going to have to crash. It's late here. I got to get it. My daughter's I'm homeschooling at the moment with work from home nonsense. So
Well, thanks for coming.
yeah.
take
All
care.
right. Nice to meet you.
Okay, Jamie.
See you, Jamie.
Stay safe.
See you later.
Stay healthy.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Art set is actually plugged in. So
Hey, Lewis,
Did I miss
bro.
you?
movement is somewhat
Came in and
late.
stole Annalise's headlock again.
This.
Oh, hold on a minute. Where's Jerome?
I'm right here as Annalise.
Guys, go check out the blockchain center in the other room. It's so cool.
It is.
What's the blockchain thing?
There's another.
Let's go have a look.
Yeah. Yeah.
Come on over. Let's go to the blockchain. Let's go look in there.
Go on the tour.
Follow him. Don't fall into the world.
Hey, did y'all get those pyramids up?
What?
How's it going, Harriet? Where are you from?
done. Cool. What time is it out there?
It is actually 2:23 a.m.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
A little earlier out here. It's 4:20 in LA. Afternoon.
Oh, okay. Nice.
How did you find out about the event?
Actually, I joined last 15 minutes, but it was good. Got some information.
Oh, that's cool. What's up, Mike?
Not much. How's it going? Who's that?
Jeff.
Jeff. Where?
Right here.
Where for?
My
No,
name's
Jeff.
Jeff.
Hold on. No, Jeff. Hey, what's up? How's it going?
Yeah, know yourself.
Good, man. Were you in? Did your thing say LA FinTech at some point?
Yeah. I don't know. Does it say it up there right now? Or?
No, right now it says new friend, but I think it said LA FinTech, which is why I sort of pinged you earlier. I'm in Santa Monica. I host Crypto Mondays LA.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think you've been. I don't recognize your face. So.
Yeah, I haven't done it before. I've actually been meaning to go, but because I hold my event on Tuesdays usually, but it's usually once a month.
You're not the LA Trader or the Bitcoin Trader Group, are you?
The LA I host it at the LA Athletic Club, but it's basically LA FinTech. It's just like a monthly event. We usually hold it downtown. Sometimes I have it in Santa Monica or the West Side, like a couple times a year.
Oh, very cool.
The next LA FinTech will actually be in this Alt BR. So.
Oh, okay, cool. What's
Elliot?
like? What do you guys do? You guys like? Do you guys actually?
Were you?
Do you have topics, or do you?
Yeah,
I'm
sometimes we have
having
like
trouble
demos.
hearing you. Where are you located?
Oh, cool.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Wait, yeah, it's kind of confusing. People like in terms of who you can hear at a particular time, but yeah. So
Yeah,
what's up?
yeah, we do.
I think you get better with it over time. Naran, where are
guess.
you?
Oh, wait.
I'm in Austin, Texas.
You're in where?
Austin, Texas.
Ah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And Jeff, you're in LA, obviously.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Crap.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's South by Southwest is supposed to be happening now, right?
Yeah, it was supposed to be like a couple of weeks ago.
A couple weeks ago.
That it got canceled. That would have been a disaster. Total disaster.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
Maria, where's from? Hey, was that Casual Friday or what? Oh, right.
Is that? Hey, handsome guy.
Thanks for tuning into his live stream. Come on, guys.
Yeah. Now, somebody tell me about those monitors back